Okay, good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. Thank you for joining us. Hello, bonjour, Annie. Thank you for joining us for Closing the Gap, Unlocking Economic Potential Through Strategic Land Uses and Infrastructure. We're excited to build on last year's forum, which was entitled Mapping the Dollars and Cents, Cents, S-E-N-S-E, of land use patterns. For those of you returning, welcome back. If mapping dollars and cents piqued your interest, and you're interested to see how the City of Peterborough can apply the concepts of how a community's return on investment in infrastructure varies for different land use patterns, then you're in the right place. This will be another insightful and thought-provoking discussion that expands our community's perspectives on land use patterns and their roles in economic development and prosperity for the City of Peterborough. So my name is Michael Papadakos. I am the Director of Asset Management and Capital Planning for the City of Peterborough. I will be your host and moderator for this evening's program. Before we begin, I'd like to share a land acknowledgement and then some reflections. So we respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teaching about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. Taking a moment to reflect on this statement and our roles and responsibilities as treaty people is a very appropriate way to kick off tonight's event. Acknowledging that our ongoing conversations around land and its uses and our definitions of productivity are very much centered in Western conceptions of social, political, and economic thought is an important starting point. While we have several thought leaders and experts with us today, there are notable voices and perspectives that are absent. We will no doubt be enlightened and exposed to ideas that have immense practical value. However, it is key to recognize the importance of ongoing dialogue, which incorporates additional perspective and other ways of knowing. As Peterborough strives to address the challenges we face, we must hold fast to our commitment to vibrancy, inclusion, equity, and sustainability. Maintaining a strong foundation of openness to out-of-the-box thinking and a commitment to a community that values the diversity of knowledge within it will foster cohesion and prepare us to face the challenges of today and into the future. So we need to be honest with ourselves. Municipalities all over the country are grappling with numerous complex challenges, ranging from significant infrastructure investment backlogs to pervasive social issues to building resilience in the face of changing climate patterns. Given this overwhelming situation, and while opinions may vary, we can find some solace in employing evidence-based decision-making when planning our collective future. Data-driven approaches can help us break the cycle of unproductive narratives that lock us into the status quo that has created the very problems we are trying to solve. In my time as the Acting Commissioner of Infrastructure Planning and Growth Management, I empowered my team to ensure that we were bringing forward the best data and subject matter expertise, regardless of how uncomfortable the ensuing conversations would be. And folks, no matter how we slice it, we are on the cusp of some very uncomfortable conversations in this community. How we have those conversations will certainly affect our outcomes. In fact, just this week, an update to our asset management plan will be released and presented to Council for discussion during the upcoming Council cycle. One key takeaway from this update is that within the City of Peterborough, we are facing an almost $135 million annual funding gap to maintain our existing infrastructure in a state of good repair and provide the infrastructure required to meet the needs of a growing community. Every year we fail to make those investments, that gap grows. And there are only two ways out of this hole that are in our control at the city: more funding through higher property taxes and user fees, or reduced levels of service. And neither one of those options is particularly desirable. How did we get here? What are the underlying causes of how we have ended up with such a backlog of required investment? And more importantly, what can we do differently today that helps us start reversing this trend and places future generations of residents and businesses in a more economically sustainable position? Hopefully today's discussion, along with ongoing asset management planning projects underway, can help us along the journey of tackling this thorny and challenging issue. On that note, I'm very excited to introduce our keynote speaker, Joe Minicozy from Urban 3, who will set the stage for us today. Following Joe's presentation, we will be joined on stage by 3 local experts for a panel discussion to unpack these concepts for our local context. And then we'll have some time for a brief Q&A where my colleague Brad Appleby, the Director of Planning, Development, and Urban Design, will join us to field some questions from the audience. Urban 3 is an innovative firm that takes a different approach to land value economics, property and retail tax analysis, and community design. They empower communities with new insights into their own data. Their work makes a quantifiable case for better city planning, urban design, and smarter growth. And this is the important part, they back up their stories with facts and figures. Joe is an urban planner imagining new ways to think about and visualize land use, urban design, and economics. Joe founded Urban 3 to explain and visualize market dynamics created by tax and land use policies. Their work establishes new conversations across multiple professional sectors, policymakers, and the public to creatively address the challenges of urbanization. Urban 3's work in pioneering geospatial representation of economic productivity has promoted a paradigm shift in understanding the economic potency of urbanism and the value of well-designed cities. Their studies for municipalities across Canada, United States, and internationally have affected the reevaluation of public policy and instituted a broader understanding of market dynamics created by tax policy. Joe holds a Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Miami and a Master of Architecture and Urban Design from Harvard. In 2017, Joe was recognized as one of the 100 most influential urbanists of all time. He is a sought-after lecturer on city planning issues, and his work has been featured in numerous journals and at international conferences. Please join me in welcoming Joe Minicozy.
Thank you, Michael, for that very kind introduction and thoughtful introduction. I'm going to start my presentation with a couple of warm-up exercises, if you will. If I can put all my lessons up front about what I'm presenting and the way I talk about cities, if you could take away anything from the show, it's just these first couple of pieces. I tend to think of cities like a form of DNA, that we all have DNA. This is how I started my life when I was 3 months old and had a lot of hair, and this is my trajectory. So I'm going to be my grandfather whether I like it or not, right? You all do this with yourselves, or more importantly, again, when I had hair, I'm going to be my father. Now, I've got a lot of genetic things I can't change in my life. I'm genetically Italian. I'll wave my hands around a lot when I talk. But I also suffer from a genetic predisposition to heart disease that my family has. So I have to do things to grow appropriately into the future, right? I can't eat pizza every day. I would love to, but I can't because of the saturated fat content. These are decisions that I'm making on a daily basis. One of the things to maybe walk away with is, who is Peterborough's grandmother or grandfather? Who do you want to be when you grow up? What's your role model that you have in your mind as you think growing forward? Who's had the heart attack that you've had? You know, you're essentially very similar to a Rust Belt community in the States, and you've suffered the same issues of the loss of manufacturing. So now what? So that's one takeaway. The next one is more audience participation. So I'm going to give you 5 seconds to do some analysis and give me the number of shapes you see on a kid's puzzle. No one's going to fail. Just shout out the answers. I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Ready, go. How many shapes do you see in this kid's puzzle? Okay, who's got the answers? Shut them out. 10? 30? Anybody want to go higher than 30? 50. All right, we got an overachiever in the audience. Great. How many kids were on the school bus? What time was it on the clock? What's awesome about our brains is we have a filtering process that we actually steer information by the questions that are asked. So you didn't see that there were 5 kids on the bus. You didn't see that it was 10 after 10 on the clock because I didn't ask you that question. When I go to cities and I see people run community meetings, oftentimes they put the question out there and frame it before we even talk about the data that's there. We miss all the other information that's there because of the mindset that you're coming into the meeting with your framed question, or how the data is presented. What you're about to see with all the way that we do work, we just ask different questions. There's nothing magic about this. We just think differently about cities, and I want to share that with you all. So that's my lesson. Find your grandparent and ask different questions. So I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. I don't know if y'all have been to Asheville, North Carolina. Asheville is about 120,000 people. It's one of the top 10 cities for tourists in the entire United States, but that's Asheville in 1990, completely boarded up. These are basically buildings we walked away from. That's a 1996 Chevy Celebrity right there. And we had this attitude that we weren't urbane, we weren't a city, we were essentially a rural mountain town, and people in the community just gave up on these buildings, even though we were have them all around. I went to work for this real estate development company called Public Interest Projects. It's a for-profit real estate development company. Our job was to fix buildings and start businesses. So we would polish a building and take it from this to this, all by asking different questions. So these were 400 square foot apartments. Let me ask the question to the audience: who here lives in a 400 square foot, or would want to live in a 400 square foot apartment? Show of hands. Okay, we got one. Let me ask a different question. Who here in this room has lived in a 400 square foot apartment at some point in their lives? There you go. There's our marketing study. And that's basically what we did. The banks told us no one would ever live there. People that knew the market said that nobody would ever live there, but we knew our population. We knew that people that are recently moved to town, recently graduated, they would choose it. By the way, that was 99% leased up the day that we opened the building. And we found ourselves talking with our community about why we're doing our real estate development and fixing buildings that no one cared for in our community, and why does it make sense for y'all? Why does it make sense for our community? And I love this out of the Oxford American Dictionary: incorporate, to constitute a company, a city, or other organization as a legal corporation. So by law, our city of Asheville is just a really big real estate development corporation called a city. And also our county is incorporated, our state of North Carolina is incorporated, and so is our country. Joe Biden said this on the Stephen Colbert Show when he was vice president: the United States is the largest corporation in the world. By the way, I'm such a nerd, I looked it up. There it is. Now, we did have a failed CEO as a president for a little while, hopefully not again. But this is how our business operates as a government. So my city at $14 billion of taxable value is 7 times the value of Ted Turner. So why are we making decisions based off what people say on Facebook? Would Ted Turner do that? Of course not. Ted Turner's going to look at Facebook, but Ted Turner's not going to run his business off Facebook comments. So why does my city run its government off that? So my city is essentially a finite boundary of land that has to be managed. We have a boundary that's very similar to what you all have on what our city can grow to. Now the difference is our county actually grows more land outside versus what you all have here. But those acres are critically important, or think of it this way, your hectares. When you talk to a farmer is going to talk about the land yield is a unit of economics. So what's the water needed per acre or per hectare, the labor, the crop yield, right? Let's do the same with buildings. So this is one of the buildings we rehabbed. We put in retail, office, residential up here. And we wouldn't have done it if the city didn't do the streetscape project. So thank you, city, for the garbage can, the bike rack, 2 benches, and a street tree. Awesome. People actually accused us of being subsidized, that the city subsidized our building with that sidewalk. Fine. What did it cost? $30,000 worth of stuff right there. We took the taxable value from $300,000 to $11 million. So what our community got was 3,500% more taxes off that property. How about a thank you card for that? Go out and buy 3,500% more garbage cans. We don't care. This is how we build communities' wealth. And again, people have biases. They ask the wrong question or make the wrong statement. And so in this case, people would say, well, Joe, that's cute. That's $11 million. We've got this Walmart for $20 million. Fair enough. That's a bigger number, right? But it took 34 acres of our farm to make that Walmart happen versus 0.2 acres. When you use gross numbers of total value, you're missing the point on productivity. So rather than total productivity, let's see what we're producing in taxes per acre. We're producing 100 times more taxes, double the sales taxes. Y'all don't get sales taxes. The province gets them here. But that's what we get is the local take. And then obviously more residents per acre and more jobs. How is it that this stuff in the downtown is so productive and this stuff on the suburban strip is so unproductive? And it's really don't hate the player, hate the game, understand the game. There's an incentive to waste your real estate and deliver a low-value building, period. So I want you to realize this isn't complex math that I'm doing here. This is simple fifth grade division. So let's put it a different way. Could you imagine if I said, you know, my truck gets 650 miles per tank? It's awesome. Like, you know how silly that sounds because all tanks are different sizes. You don't measure things on the kilometers per tank or the miles per tank. You say miles per gallon. The numbers just change, and we should all be driving BMW Acetas at 70 miles per gallon. Sorry to the Prius owners, but this is way more efficient, right? It's also more dangerous. If you have a head-on on that thing, you're stuck. It's really cute. It's a joke. Anyway, back to Asheville. This is the value of just fixing up buildings, just taking those upper stories and making them active. So we didn't get a new building in downtown Asheville till 2009. So this is the value of historic preservation. To show you that it's not all love and roses in Asheville, these are actual campaign ads from the 1990s. This guy, Chris Peterson, complaining about $26 million invested in downtown parking garages and streetscape projects. $26 million. Downtown development for bureaucrats instead of water, sewer, and streets for our citizens. Y'all got people like Chris in your town? I don't want to pay taxes in downtown. It's like, all right, $26 million is a lot of money, but let's do some math here. If you invest $26 million on a $100 million asset and it grows to $600 million, is investing 26 and yielding $500 million a good return on investment? Yeah. Why the hell do we listen to Chris? Our downtown is now worth $2 billion. And by the way, you're not going to win Chris over. Chris has a website with fires. This is the mayor getting hit with a lightning bolt. I like this fire and brimstone. I asked the mayor, I'm like, is that a liquor drink? She goes, yeah, it should be. By the way, he misspelled charlatans. Anyway, some folks you just can't win over with facts, but allow them their opportunity. But this is what you see. For every dollar of county taxes somebody's paying to the county in property taxes per acre, their brother or sister in the city is paying about 5 times that. Here's the Walmart, the mall, a 2-story building that's mixed use, 3-story, and 6-story. This is all under the high-rise code. It doesn't have to be big buildings, but you see the potency once you start stacking stories. It's that simple. Incidentally, some people are like, dude, what's your problem? Why do you hate Walmart? You're always picking on Walmart. Just so you know, I attended the International Association of Assessors Conference. I don't know, is there an assessor in the room? Anybody hang out with assessors? Can anyone imagine 3,000 of them in one place? It makes a planning conference feel like Burning Man, like this is the squarest thing I've ever done. But this guy got up at 8 in the morning and did this amazing presentation on how cheap his buildings are. I'm in the back of the room watching this all go down and thinking how brilliant this is. I mean, think about that, how efficient. One meeting, 3,000 assessors lowering your taxes in one meeting. That's brilliant. So I went to the microphone and I asked him, I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? And he shot back to me, 15, 20 years. We designed the building to depreciate it as fast as possible. We'll build another building and depreciate it down again. We don't care about the buildings, they're throwaway. You're a corporation, folks. Is that what you want in your community as a 15-year investment? If you're okay with that, great. That's the life cycle of a cat, right? This is what I'm a dog person, sorry, couldn't resist. This is the permanence of what's going on in your community, or the thin trade-off of buying down that building. I would argue people don't see that because we're not delivering the information in a way to absorb it. We're not talking about it that way. So what we try to do is reframe it. If I can show you your brain, right? I can show you your brainstem activity in blue and your creative thought process in green. I can show you what's going on in your head. Let's just do an economic model of our region. I made this model when our county state representative called us a cesspool of sin. And I was on the Downtown Association board, and we're like very polite Southerners. We're like, did you really mean that? So here's our county's model. This is non-taxable. This is Mount Mitchell, the tallest mountain east of the Mississippi, and Mount Pisgah, 2 non-taxable properties. Just to be crude about it, they don't pay me taxes. I don't care about it. Green is low value. purple is high value. This is a big purple splotch right there. That parcel right there is the Biltmore Estate. That's America's largest house. That property is worth $100 million. Do y'all have a $100 million house in your community? No. I know that because we did your math. You also don't have a 180,000 square foot house sitting on 8,000 acres of land. This is like a biggest gas tank ever, right? So rather than total value, here's value per acre, and let's not stop there. Let me show it to you in 3D. Can you tell where downtown Asheville might possibly be? It's this big purple mountain, right? We can also see our little cousin of Black Mountain. This is a little municipality of 13,000 people. You can see it's a little downtown. The tallest building in Black Mountain is 3 stories tall. Now, I use this model for when I talk to folks out in Fairview out here. They think they're paying a lot of taxes. They have no idea what we're paying in county taxes to them, right? So I show this to them and say, go ahead and hate on us, call us a cesspool, but how about a thank you card for all that money that we give you? Our city is 12% of the entire county's land area. We're producing 50% of their taxes. And again, until we talk about the data, we won't know that. So for you all, we did your model. Thank you for having us do this. This was a lot of fun. We love working in Canada. You're way more rational about this than in the States. You're very different from the United States, way more polite. But anyway, for you all, your tax system, you have an assessed value and a levy rate that you can control. Your levy rate is different from ours in that you have a different levy rate for different uses. So starting at $400,000 of value in commercial, multi-residential, and residential, and by the way, you did change your multi-residential in 2009, but we'll start going in the door at $400,000. These are the different levy rates, and these are the different tax bills. So what you can see right here is that let me get my glasses on. This is about 1.5 to 2 times the difference in the taxes for multifamily versus single-family residential, and 1.5 for commercial versus residential. So another way of putting that, not everybody's paying the same rate of taxes per square foot of land use. Commercial is actually more productive than single-family, or per dollar, I should say, of value. So I like to think of our tax system as like a 1970s equalizer compared to your tax system. You actually have a lot more knobs to turn than ours, so take advantage of that. Now, with your revenue system, and I know that I'm flying through all of these slides, we'll have this as a PDF for you all as a report. But basically on the left is your revenue coming in the door and your money that you spend. What we can put on a map is the property tax, so we know where that is and how we use it. We'd recommend to do the same with the revenue systems as well, as start to map that stuff too, but the property tax is the easiest one to start with. Another way of looking at your money, this is the money coming in the door, and we call they're called butterfly charts or a sand key chart, but basically show the flow of the money through your system and where it goes. Another thing that y'all could do is start to change the way that you account for your fund buckets. If you know where it's coming to, rather than having one large bucket that everything gets split, you can start to split up your revenue stream. But anyway, this is kind of the flow of your tax system. To your model, this is your total value, or miles per tank, or kilometers per tank. So your GE plant shows up as red. It's not a purple. You can see some purples over here, but notice how the purples are all big parcels of land. Big parcels of land, of course, big value. But productivity, this is the per hectare. You see this heat shift into the downtown, and here it is in 3D. So think of your levy rate as a blanket that's got the same thickness, and you drop it on this model. Where are you getting the majority of your taxes? And it's coming out of your downtown right now. There's other little foothills of value out here, but basically this is what you have going on. By the way, this is your Costco down there. So in your province, it doesn't really make a whole heck of a lot of sense to have single-use retail, particularly in a cheap building, because you don't get any of the sales taxes. That gets up to the province, and then it gets laundered on its way back to you all. That's what it looks like to me. So this is the layer of film that comes off of your property taxes is a model. So if this is your value, this is the tax yield. Basically, it is what it is. This is the money that's coming out. So zooming in, you could see that. You could see how low the Costco is relative to everything else down Lansdowne Street. This is your downtown, is the ratio of productivity. So think of this as your physical footprint. It takes up 5% of your city. It's producing 13% of your value from a property tax standpoint. The ratio of physical to financial is a 1-to-3 ratio. A good downtown is somewhere around 1-to-6 of potency. So you still have some room to grow. A lot of that you could see just in the low values here on the southwest side and across the river. So that's opportunity to build that up. But you can see the indicator species of what you already have. So it's not like you don't have a downtown. You have something to learn from. Taxable, non-taxable, your city's about 42% non-taxable. There's no magic number here. This is just, we ran the math on it. Incidentally, you have like these two oddballs out here, the airport and the landfill are part of your community, but really they're outside the boundary. So we cut them off because that's about 13%. So really inside your main boundary, you're looking at 33% non-taxable. When you have two universities or a college and university in your footprint, that takes up a tremendous amount of land, particularly Trent University. But this isn't out of the norm for a college town of 33%. Actually, Asheville is 33%, and we don't have a major university. So it is what it is. Inside your downtown, you're looking at 32%. Again, this isn't to pass judgment, this is just an x-ray. And maybe from a judgmental standpoint, this is where your fertile soil is, this is where your mountain of value is. Really consider whether or not you want to use land for non-taxable, like a surface parking lot or something like that, because that's missing an opportunity for growth. Land use type. So I've shown you the model. This is going through individual ingredients of your community. Everybody's got a Walmart. Your Walmarts are averaging $74,000 of tax revenue per hectare. So we'll start with that as a control subject. From here forward, it's going to be on the bottom of every slide, so you can have an indicator species of whether or not you're above or below a Walmart. Your single family in per hectare is pulling 58, so less than the Walmart in production. Also, you have really good data on the birth date of your buildings. Your averaging single family is somewhere around 1969 of average value for single family detached. As you look at other building types, like these are duplexes. These range from 31 to 215 across the slides. As a pile, it's pulling about 70,000 per hectare, but the birth date for those is 1920. So this is showing me that you've made some things more difficult to do if you only have old properties like these or this one, these ones here, which are your triplexes. These are again 69,000 at 1912. So they're coming at the same average. These are your quadplexes, so 4 units. These are at 67, a little bit less value. 1907, are you seeing a trend here? You've actually found a way to keep this stuff from happening in your current trends. These are your 5 and 6 plexes, the average 73,000, which is about the Walmart, but more than single family detached. This is 1919. And then your condos, I think condos started in Canada in 2006, so it's going to be, or 2001, sorry. 2006 is your average year of your condos, and they're pulling 90,000. Incidentally, this one right here is pulling 751,000 per hectare of taxes compared to the 50,000 for your single-family detached. So this is a high producer. But going back to the townhouses and row houses for a second, you have these quadplexes, which are effectively row houses. If you talk to somebody in the 1920s, that's what they would have called them, but they just happen to be owned by the same owner. But that's a house, these are 4 houses. These are pulling $150,000 an acre versus the new stuff at 178 or 121. So your grandparents have left you this crumb trail of value that you can learn from. But your row houses are averaging 96,000, median year 2003. Your apartments, again, from 100,000 to 400,000 of value. If you're seeing a trend here. It's the multifamily is more productive. This is 180 per hectare. We don't have the year built on this data, so you're missing that. That could be something to work on. But showing you these examples and making a bar chart with them, here's single family. This is a roll-up slide from what you just saw, all the way up to your apartments at $179,000 of productivity. Lots of times I hear from people and they're like, apartments cost the city or the apartments are bad. Well, they're giving you all the money. So be aware of that. So here's looking at their median year with single family at 1969. And you see how all of these are hugging pre-war, actually pretty much around World War I era of stock. More productive, but why are they not happening more now is the question. That might be a zoning issue, it might be biases, whatever. And then your current contemporary townhouses are killing it at 96,000, and here's condominiums. Going from residential to commercial, again, your Walmart is down here at 74,000. Here's your Home Depot at half that value. Costco at 47,000. This is the Voyager Place Shopping Center at 56,000, less than Walmart. This is the Portage Place or Portage? Portage Place at 60,000 per hectare. Canadian Tire, 37,000 and 97,000. And then this is kind of cool, the Shoppers Drug. We went ahead and pulled these. Notice the difference, 118 to 192. Well, why? And it comes down to basically parking. So these are at the same scale. These are the same size, but notice how much less parking this one has versus this. So when you actually add more parking, you're essentially diluting the value. Did y'all get that? When people talk about, oh, I want free parking, it's not free. You're actually paying for it in a reduced tax base on that property. That's the transaction that's happening there. So just buyer be aware. Just be aware of that, that implication of what happens in your tax system. The more parking you add, the lower the value. That's one of the lessons that you've got in your system. When you get into your hotels, 60,000, again, see lots of parking. Even though this is a pretty sizable building, this is 136, and this one's 604,000. So, this is just around the corner over here. Go give that building a hug. It's giving you a big value. And again, these are office buildings at 30,000, 129, and 400,000, respectively. And then this is the big winner. That's the top of your model, producing $1 million of property taxes per hectare. That's the big contributor. So here they are, here's their bar chart. And then there's a lesson from going from your commercial, now let's mix it up and do some mixed use. We couldn't resist the quick check. So I don't know if y'all hang out at Jerry's Quick Check. But here it is pulling 133,000 per hectare. What is that? That's like almost double a Walmart. Would you have thought that that thing's double a Walmart? And it's illegal. You can't build this building anymore. Like, why? It might not be the best use, but it can change. But anyway, here's just over here at George Street, 474, 965. And then let's talk about your grandparents. So this is a building, or actually great-grandparents left you this one, 1898. Here it is today, still producing $400,000 per hectare of taxes. This wasn't built with the 15-year window of maximizing its gains, right? It's had several uses. It's been recycled. Here's another one, 1879. Here it is today at 600,000 per hectare versus the Walmart at 73. And then I love this shot. I mean, your grandparents had horse technology and dirt roads, and they left you these gems. Look at that telephone pole, by the way. That's pretty crazy. Anyway, here they sit today, 300,000, 400 or 500, 575 for this one. This is a gift that just keeps on giving. These buildings here, again, more horses. And they're pulling 200 to 900,000. 965, this one's almost $1 million per hectare of tax production, which is incredibly rich. So just to show you a couple of comparisons, this is those buildings, this is their footprint at the same scale as the Voyager place. So this is producing more money, but it's a lot more land area than that, right? So to make this one equal this one, you would just need to do 3.5 of the 351 Georges to equal the Voyager shopping center. Y'all follow me with that? This is how much, think of the, as Michael said, you want to think of this land as sacred. It's a sacred gift that's been given to us. How do you use it? Why would you waste it? How much other planets can you make? So these are the lessons of your land use across the model. 2 hotels. This is a hotel. This is a hotel. You would need 3.25 of the Peterborough Inns to equal the Best Western. So this is, I call this the Brady Bunch slide. It's like residential across the top, low density, medium density, high density, commercial, low, medium, and high, and mixed use, low, medium, and high. And these are the sticker prices. So you can see the quick check and how awesome it is compared to all of these other land uses. It's actually better than high density residential on average. And here's how they stack up. So what you saw in that model is essentially a 3-dimensional version of a bar chart is the magic behind it. We just build it across the model. So speaking of the model, here's where they all are in the model, just so you can locate them. This is the Costco, this is the Y Lofts, and then this is the George Street properties relative to the model. So building age is important. How you grew, this is like almost like an x-ray of where your properties are. So these are all the different parcels as a percentage of land use based on the decade that they were built. So we started to see like there's a clear break here at around 1960 where you see that huge land consumption happen. So about 80% of your land use happened after 1960. So when you look at the value, so here's the break at 1960. These are the average values per hectare by decade and on before and after 1960. So you actually, as you modernized and grew out, you actually lowered your value, even though these are all newer buildings, right? Yet the average value has actually dropped almost $10,000 or more than $10,000 in value. What's crazy is 80% of your land use is in that lower value production. Let that wash over you for a second. That growth that your most recent parents did is actually not produced wealth. And that's the financial model that was built over time. So looking at it and seeing what you went through a growth spurt in 1960, and you could see it right here. You actually grew a big chunk of your population. If we just start at 1960, though, however, and this is probably when your GE plant expanded, so it brought in a bunch of labor, and you did what a lot of American cities did. We just went ahead and just grew. We just modernized. We're going to stretch out. Everybody's going to get a car. Well, in that pattern, you grew 44% of your population from 1961 to today, which is a pretty big growth, 44% new people, but you did it on 80% more land. So you caught the wave. This isn't going to work for anybody under the age of 40, I know that. He's from here, Max Headroom. Anyway, it's a joke. Here's what your great-grandparents had up until 1941. This is the amount of land area. If this is your whole land area, is your whole entire city. And then this is your population density. So they basically started densifying and stayed within their boundary as they added more people. And then after World War I, you did this and essentially doubled your land area by 1961. That, you had a little inflection, you grew some people, and then you basically leveled out. So you're basically in a net position of density of where you were in 1941 by the time you reached 1961. In 1961, y'all got batty. This is what you did in 1961, which is insane because you did that to your square. This is what you're dealing with right now. The infrastructure that was put down in 1960 is the infrastructure that is calling to get fixed right now. And your grandparents didn't think about that when they put all of this stuff in. They didn't think about the long-term effects. We just modernized. This is what happened to your density. And then you did this in the 2000s, and then you basically controlled yourselves a little bit and didn't annex that much more land up until from 2002 to today. But look at your density. You've essentially maintained a flat line through this whole period. Now, I understand, Joe, hey, you know, we don't like density. Density is a bad word in our town. We don't want to be Toronto. That's not who we are, right? But you're paying for it. So there's all that infrastructure that's in those boundaries, and this is the road per person in those sections. Notice your great-grandparents staying at 8 foot of road per person, and somehow you flip that to peaking at 12 feet of road per person. That's great. You want to stretch yourself out, you want to buy more road, knock yourself out. There's a cost to that, though. There's a cost to me eating pizza. Does that make sense? I don't want to be scoldy about it, but this is the reality of your infrastructure. And your engineering department knows about this. They're trying to do what they can with the money that they have available. So this is another way of looking at your data and then how you use your land. So, you know, this is the amount of building footprint that you have in your entire boundary. That's it. This is your parking, this is your roads. This is everything else, berms, buffers, backyards, parks, farms, whatever. So you're actually not using a lot of your land efficiently. You know, this is it. That's all. If you want to squeeze everybody together, that's the amount of land you really need. So you've stretched yourselves out. You can see the parking down Lansdowne right there for that section. And you can see the parking around downtown. Now, it might not be as convenient as you like it, but it's there. Incidentally, you actually have more land dedicated to parking than roads, which is wild. So the car, when it moves around, takes up less space than when the car stops in your community. Now there's a financial consequence. This is a surface parking lot. This is a suburban stripplex, and then this is a laundromat in the neighborhood. This is the amount of surface parking, 100%, 65%, 24%. This is the total tax revenue off each of these parcels. So this one's killing it, right? $160,000 tax bill. Woo, that's crazy. This one's only paying $5,000. Okay. Per hectare, this one's producing double, more than double, what this is paying per hectare, and this one's not paying anything. So if you're not charging me for that, if you're not charging me for using your infrastructure, that's a tax break, right? Per hectare. So think about that. When you demand parking or people ask about parking, there's a trade-off. This is all spatial analysis. I'm full of jokes that don't work for younger people, sorry. So that road infrastructure, this is how it breaks down in your community. This is your local roads, your arterial collector roads, and your arterial roads. You tend to spend more of your time on arterial roads, so they should be shared on by more people. When you get to your local roads, like this little cul-de-sac that's out here, that one dead end, why is that part of your transportation system? There's only like 12 people that live on that. Why is that? Do you all go and drive down that one cul-de-sac and spend your time there? Is that part of your transportation network? That's essentially a publicly funded driveway. It shouldn't be part of your street system, but it's there. So just be mindful of that because that's where the majority of your cost is in that local system. But you have 990 kilometers of roadway. So when I, as a developer, build you those roads in that subdivision and give them to your community, that's a ticking time bomb for a future generation to pay. So you have enough roads to go, every 50 years you rebuild your roads. You have enough roads to go from Peterborough to Montreal. Would you choose to build a road to Montreal every 50 years? I don't know. Did you make that choice? No. You've just done it over time, and now this is what you're stuck with. So when people look at roads, they tend to see them in the budget of the city's budget. They'll talk about the road as an asset. Roads are not assets. But seriously, look at your city's budget. You'll see it there. My computer's an asset. If I had delivery van, that's an asset. My office is an asset, right? I can sell you this computer. I can sell you my van. I can sell you my building. Can Peterborough pick up its roads and sell them to Ottawa? But you can't, right? Every city is stuck with these, but we just look at them the wrong way. So when a road gets built, it's got a life cycle. Every 10 years or so, you're going to be doing some resurfacing or preventative maintenance. You're going to do that for about 4 cycles. After that 4th cycle, pretty much on average, then you do a reconstruction. It's about $1.5 million a mile. It's going to depend it's going to average differently at different locations, but once you go through that sort of heart attack, then you get to start the cycle all over again. And this goes on forever as long as you have that road. So here's when you built all of your roads. This is the first wave. So in 1850, we kind of estimated, this isn't 100% accurate, but it's close enough. In 1850, when your great-grandparents built those roads, they came back to haunt you with their first rebuild in the early 1900s. This is what the rebuild looks like. Then those roads got rebuilt again for the second rebuild in the 1960s, and this is what the second rebuilds look like. So you're going to eventually go through a third and a fourth and a fifth. This is going to keep on going in perpetuity. You're sitting right here right now. In 2030, it's going to suck. I'm just saying. Watch out. Now, it might not happen all in 2030, but you can see how you're going to go through 3 waves of infrastructure build, and that general decade is going to be a lot of infrastructure. So adding more to the system, just make sure that you can pay for it all going forward, and just be honest with yourselves. So that 1960 stuff is what's coming back in 2030 and haunting you, basically. Look at all the roads that you built in 1960. A road is forever. Again, another joke that's not going to work for most of you. I'm bombing it here tonight. So here's what you're spending on your roads, your road budget, if you will. You're about $36 million in your cap through your revenues, your capital levies, debt service, and reserves. This is what you should be spending in the roads. This is where it's going, and you should have a life cycle cost reserve on top of that. So you're essentially at a deficit of about $21 million across the system. And you see this just by the quality of the roads that you drive on. You talk to anybody in engineering, that they're probably panicked about it, but they're not going to be on fire alerts. Public works departments are just trying to make do in every city that we go to. And it's because we're sort of starving them for their proper investment. So looking at your roads and just shoving that cost into them per hectare, this is the model, the way that it looks. We just did a cursory model to say, okay, let's take a look at that and let's look at it against the revenue. Here's your total revenue of your city. If we just take out 10%, because the rest of that money's got to go to police, fire, parks, the finance department, things like that. 10% is typical what goes to the road system, so that's about this much. And let's bring back the costs now. So this is the money going in to pay for the roads. Here's what the roads need. So if we kind of turn on the X-ray specs, you can see how much of a deficit you are in your system. You need to be doing this math to understand your costs and consequences. You need to be having a conversation as citizens about the true costs of your land use patterns. And the math is there, do it. So we've done this in other places. And I'll just give you a quick version. This is in Springfield, Missouri. This is one of their local billionaires. This guy wrote a book called The Great Good Game of Business. It's a great book about business, and I love this quote. A business should be run like an aquarium where everybody can see what's going on, what's going in, what's moving around, and what's coming out. Of course, cities should be as transparent as possible. You should see all of this. So here's their city, and this is the money flow of their city. Their sales taxes and the property taxes stacked on top of it. They run their city off sales taxes, which is kind of crazy, but hey, it's Missouri. You can see like residential doesn't produce anything. So they're giving themselves a big tax break at their residential properties. This is the Bass Pro Shops world headquarters and museum. Very productive because they're selling a lot of boats out of that thing. But the property tax is very thin. Compare that to the downtown. And their downtown's not great, but their downtown's killing it. They actually have 2 downtowns. They have this other one called Commercial Street that's doing well too. So this is their money sitting on top of their costs. Or looking at the model from a side view, like you're looking at a boat in the lake, where you have the money coming out above the water line, and then this is the sunk costs below the water line. And this is the money paid, this is what it costs for you to live there. Here's the net position, what's in the black and what's in the red. They're in an annual operating deficit of $48 million a year that they're underpaying in their system. And this is the way that it looks across the model. So the deficit isn't equal across the model, that 20% are covering the cost of 80% of the land use, which is not a good recipe for success. But now they know, and they can make choices accordingly. And oftentimes in communities, they're like, well, Joe, people want to have single-family housing, particularly in the United States. Like, well, this is who we are. The white picket fence, everybody gets a single-family detached house. Great. I want to have a full head of hair. I think you should pay for it. It's a joke. This This is what we do with our political discourse. We don't talk about the cost of you paying for my hairdo, right? But we should. I would love this. It's not about what we love. Let's talk about how can we afford this stuff. So just to show you close on one example, in South Bend, when we did the analysis, we really wanted to drive the point home and make it clear. These are 88 houses in a 1920s neighborhood in a grid pattern. How you develop property has a direct effect on your financial consequences. So here they are. This is their annual cost in roads, stormwater, and water, and their total. So they're at an annual cost for 88 houses of $122,000. We did the same for a modern collection of 88 houses. This is like a cul-de-sac with cul-de-sacs on it. This is a crazy example. There it is. It's kind of awesome. But here's its costs. And let me do a roll-up. So here they are. Water pipes, pretty much the same, $12,000 a piece. When you look at the storm and sewer pipes, however, now you start to see this one pull away at about 1.2 times the cost of their peer. Again, 88 houses. Road cost, significantly more, double versus this. Total annual cost, 1.5 times more cost to serve versus these folks. Now let's look at the money that comes in. It's pretty much identical. You're actually getting a little bit more money here versus here. So the deficit on the grid is $57,000 in taxes versus the 88 houses in the subdivision at $100,000. If that's what you want, awesome. Can you afford it? Notice how both of these are in deficit, because this is what every city does. We basically take the taxes off the residents and put it onto other properties and hope that it works out. So if you're not measuring this stuff, you can't manage. If you're not having a conversation about this with the facts, you're going to be flying blind. So this is depressing stuff, I know. How do you get out of this? One is look for productive stuff and just do more of it. You have it in your community. Do more of this stuff. You want to think of the long-term effects as well. Create value that just keeps on giving back to your grandkids, and leave a legacy. Create opportunities for incremental growth. Why not do more of this stuff where you can? It's productive. People use it. You remember that your infrastructure is forever. Doesn't disappear. And put your costs on a map as well. You've done the revenue side. Take the next step and geo-account. And we call this geo-accounting because your accountant doesn't care if you buy a boat, right? Your accountant cares if you can afford a boat. So just put the stuff on a map, be agnostic, and let the data come back and tell you something. And just to close, y'all are worth $10.2 billion as a corporation. That's what your municipal product is of your real estate. $10.2 billion. You could sell Peterborough, sell it to Ottawa, and go buy like 2.5 Leafs if you want. You could. Not that you'd want them, but anyway. But I can tell you Larry Tannenbaum knows Austin Matthews' towel bill. I can tell you the cups in our nightclub cost 5 cents a pop. You should understand what a mile of pipe costs in your community. And if you could be one thing, become more efficient. Letterkenny's a big deal here, apparently. I've been told. Anyway, finally, there's a book that covers a lot of this stuff. Chuck Marone at Strong Towns covers a lot of our work and explains it really well in this book if you want to share this information with other folks. And thanks for letting me do some math.
All right, thank you very much, Joe. That was info-packed, maybe a little bit on the depressing side, but I did like your takeaway there that let's be agnostic, let's look at the data, let's have the grown-up conversations. So next I'd like to welcome our panelists to the stage so we can have some follow-up on this. So just let me read your introductions and then you folks can come up here. First we have James Jorgensen. So James is Vice President of Infrastructure Planning and Asset Management at GEI Consultants, formerly GM Blue Plan. He's also a board member of the Institute of Asset Management Canada. James has over 20 years of consulting experience for municipal clients. He has been involved in a multitude of municipal asset management and infrastructure planning projects, including driving infrastructure master plans, asset management plans, rates, and financial studies. He has a foundational knowledge of all municipal public infrastructure assets with an expertise in water and wastewater planning. He maintains a technical project focus and delivers projects with a hands-on collaborative approach. We're very lucky to have him and his team helping us on a couple of key projects, including our sanitary master plan that's under development. James is a corporate member of the Institute of Asset Management and a board member of the Institute of Asset Management Canada chapter, recently admitted to the Register of Asset Management Professionals, and sits on the IAM International Climate Emergency Group. He actively contributes to industry initiatives, and as a steering committee member, recently contributed to the development of Canadian Network of Asset Managers Asset Management Competence Framework. So let's welcome James to the stage. And James is going to be athletic and come with the big step. Okay, next we have Jamie Coughlin. Jamie's the Director of Business Attraction, Retention, and Expansion with Peterborough and the Kawarthas Economic Development. For those of you who were here last year, you'll remember that we had Rhonda Keenan joining us. Rhonda's in Ottawa for a conference, and Jamie has kindly agreed to lend his expertise. So as the Director of Business Attraction, Retention, and Expansion, his title is his role. PCAD promotes the community as a destination of choice for investment and helps current and potential Peterborough businesses grow. His position leverages his 27-plus year experience in the economic development field. His professional portfolio includes service with provincial and territorial governments, municipal economic development agencies, small business lending, public market development, and the private sector. Jamie is motivated by connecting dots and creative problem solving. Let's welcome Jamie to the stage. All right, more athleticism. Okay, and finally we have Paul Bennett, the president of Ashburnham Realty. So born and raised in Peterborough, Paul got an economics degree from Wilfrid Laurier University and started Ashburnham Realty in his university years. His commitment to infill mixed-use developments that improve the livability, vibrancy, and economic productivity of our urban areas is reflected in the local projects he stewards. The goal of Ashburnham is to be true community builders and do all that they do with purpose and vision toward a more positive and sustainable future. Please welcome Paul to the stage. Okay, and Joe, come on back out. Okay. Hello. Okay. We're good. We're in business. So we're gonna take it a little bit of a relaxed approach, kind of more casual conversational one. Myself and our team, we've been working with Urban 3 over the last several months on this project. It's been very, very exciting and very educational for all of us. So we've got some thoughts and some musings that have kind of come up through that. So I want to put some things out there, and then we'll take some time and just kind of feel free to jump in. I'll also try and direct some of the comments to you as well. So we're 70 plus years into this development pattern that Joe has kind of illustrated for us. It's, I think, fair to say, fundamentally unsustainable in numerous aspects. But not only has it permanently shaped the physical landscape, it's also locked in behaviors, beliefs, and practices of residents, and they've come to build their lifestyles around this development pattern. So, Joe, I'll start with you, and then, how do we start the process of digging out of this hole in the face of this? Well, I presume there's going to be some resistance, right? Change is always met with some kind of resistance. So, how do we start that?
Yeah, I think I've become a big fan of behavioral economics literature and studying the psychology of decision making. And there's actually behavior science of how we make the wrong choices. So it's not their fault that they've done this. I think that if you think about the wealth that they actually did build in the early 60s going in, we just didn't reinvest it in a way that was long term. But the thing is, with any doctor, you want to present data and let the patient make an informed choice. You don't blame the patient for what's happened. So the analogy that I use, that's kind of a little painful, but it's, you think of somebody that's been smoking their entire life. The doctor doesn't yell at them. The doctor shows them a picture of their lungs and said, see these spots on the lungs? That's because you're smoking. And just makes the connection to the choice The choice is always the individuals. And if the community wants to pay more taxes, awesome. It's not our choice. But you can't dig your way out of this by digging the hole deeper.
No, good. Anyone want to pick up on that? I don't know, Paul, do you have any thoughts on?
Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah. First of all, so I want to say thanks very much. This is awesome. The fact that the city's putting this on, I think the last time we did it, it was very successful, and that was it speaks to everything that we see on the ground here in Peterborough. So I really appreciate it. Yeah, taking off what you said, I completely agree, and I think the big thing from a city perspective is a lot of short-term thought. A lot of people that make decisions based on what's happening in the next 2, 3, 4 years, when all the stuff that you're talking about is how you can invest in a community for a 100-year plus cycle. So yeah, we have to change that mindset, and to your point about the behaviors of how people respond and think about a community, and how it should develop. So.
Well, and this really, one of the things that I really like about this work is how it links the infrastructure to the land uses, right, and tries to kind of build the connections that, you pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other, right? So when we think about like asset management, right, which I guarantee you most folks in the audience, well, I'm sure if you've had conversations with me, I've probably forced you to think about asset management at some point in time, but I'm sure it's not on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. So like, James, when you're talking about asset management, like, how has this evolved in Ontario? Like, what are some of the conversations that we need to be having that starts to, like this is a predicament. Like, another thing that I've said that a lot of folks are probably tired of me hearing is that this is a predicament that has outcomes we need to manage. It's not a problem that has solutions that we can just fix, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So the evolution, I guess, 30 years this year is the birthday of the Institute of Asset Management, and that's one of the biggest global organizations that really specializes in looking at efficient use of assets, so trying to maximize the value of assets. So that's kind of the time frame that we're talking about in terms of really trying to be conscious about what we're doing with assets. Back in 1960s, you were building it because you needed it, and you weren't really thinking about the life cycle of the assets that you were building. And now we're moving into the phase of looking at the life cycle costs of all of the assets that we're putting in the ground, so the pipes, the sewers, the roads, and we're understanding much more the cost today for the capital cost, but then the future cost, so how much it costs to maintain and then go forward. And what we've heard today, I think, is really about the next level of optimizing. So we're being more optimal on when we intervene in needing to fix assets, but now we're starting to look at where it's most efficient to actually put the assets in the first place. So where should our development go? One of the tools we're making as part of the asset management plan and the wastewater master plan for the city is looking at the cost of servicing of wastewater. So for any given spot in the city, how much wastewater infrastructure is downstream of that point? And then looking at the population, because it's not just the total, it's how many people are using it. So that it's the next level, the next evolution is happening right here. And for the city of Peterborough, you're one of the first that I've seen actually doing something about it. And this is a conversation we're having. So you should give yourselves a bit of a pat on the back, I think.
Oh, thank you. We'll take that for sure. Okay, what about maybe pivot a little bit, because I think this whole conversation is taking place in the context of a continent-wide housing affordability and supply crisis, right? And many of the systems, right, that we've built over the last however many years, decades, whether that's regulatory, legislative, even the business models of development industry, construction practices, and the perceived consumer preferences, right? These aren't necessarily calibrated to face the scale of the challenge that's going to be required to help build the houses. So on one hand, right, we've got a big push, and we're calibrated to build a certain type of development, and it's a little bit maybe hard to pivot. I don't know, Joe, have you seen that other communities grapple with that challenge, or like when we contextualize this in that bigger picture of, where are the houses going to come from, right? Because we need more houses, but at the same time, we need to make sure that those houses are not going to bleed a city dry over the long term.
Well, I guess a question for the audience is just show of hands, who grew up in a multifamily product? 1, 2?
2, 3.
Yeah. So, what we're up against is we've all been ingrained with this is the only way to do housing as a single-family detached product. And so there's a bias that we all have to seeking that solution. And there's a lot of folks that demand that. You see the subsidy in the system. So if you've been subsidizing it for 70 years, why would people not want that? Because it's subsidized. So as long as we're conscious of that and say, is this the best use of our subsidy? Is this going to help solve the problem by basically adding more infrastructure that's not, this stuff doesn't pay for? Is that going to work? I think that's what we have to wrestle with, is that we're going to see a lot of consumer change. And it's not just here. This is happening, even in my hometown of Rome, New York. I don't know if y'all know Rome, New York. It's not great. It's losing 18% of its population every decade. It's one of the fastest shrinking communities, and it's still suburbanizing, which is not a recipe for winning. So I think that we're sort of addicted to a pattern that's going to be hard to break. And in most cities, they restrict the amount of growth that can happen to that product. So it's going to, you've limited the supply through zoning. It's going to drive prices up. Rome, which is actually even shrinking, is having a housing affordability crisis, which is kind of wild. So there's a lot more to it than just the surface conversation.
Yeah, Paul, jump in.
I was going to say, and I think that on a positive note in our community, I think that transition is actually kind of happening. We've talked about this briefly the other day too, but the idea of creating neighborhoods within our community, and taking that single-family home and making the living rooms and dining rooms and making that the outdoor facilities that are in the area. East City is the most recent example of ones that we've done. A building we just finished of 40 units is 38 people 38 of those 40 folks who sold their homes. Now they're a bit larger units, but it is a neighborhood where they can walk and they have green space and they can have things they can go to. So that's, again, 38 families who grew up in single-family homes who have now moved into a multi-residential type of facility. But important to that is the idea of a neighborhood. Like you're not going to get that in a multi-residential facility that is on the outskirts of town. There has to be some more to the community to actually encourage those folks to become part of the community to get out of their single-family homes.
Good. Jamie, I want to bring you into the conversation here and maybe ask, what would you say are some of the innovative ways, from your economic development perspective, that you could see us leveraging this type of development if we were to develop and tailor economic development strategies for Peterborough context? What do you think are some challenges or just general thoughts on that?
So I think one thing to consider is that the effectiveness of the economic development, just the ability to attract, grow, retain businesses, is directly related to the economic efficiency and competitively of the municipality. So taxes. Running a system that's not efficient and has this infrastructure deficit does not create an environment where someone like Paul may necessarily want to invest. But a community that does start to grapple with these issues, talk about these issues, come up with plans for these issues, is going to be much more attractive to investment. Community that entrepreneurs, if they will see that a community is starting to get their liabilities under control, is going to be a more attractive place to invest. And I think just living back to one thing Paul mentioned, I think you look at that map, and what strikes me is just, there was that massive growth in the 1960s, but we're hitting the walls, the urban area boundaries. And so we're at that stage of intensification and optimization. I love that term, whether we like it or not. So how do we make it easier, better, faster, better designed?
That's an interesting thought, and maybe I'll pivot a little bit and we'll talk about some of the specifics that, like one topic that Joe mentioned that I find very interesting. I think many folks I see a lot of my colleagues from our planning division here and folks on my asset management team in the transportation planning section. We've probably gotten a lot of heat about even just trying to bring forward the conversation about let's take a look at parking. So let's talk about the parking paradox for a second here. So we've seen the data, right? So again, Joe's point is, okay, first thing, let us see it, right? And we've seen the detrimental impacts that parking has on the economics of land development on our balance sheet. But at the same time, right, back to that lock-in, right, and sort of the trends of what people are already expecting, both, developers, builders, residents are all struggling with this idea due to consumer preferences. So Joe, thoughts, how can we start to navigate this transition?
Yeah, Asheville eliminated its parking in the late 80s, early 90s, just one of the first communities that just gave up and was like, no parking requirements downtown, period. But what they did, because we actually had all these vacant buildings that they were trying to find a way to fix. So why would I come in and buy a building and fix it and then tear the building down next door to make surface parking? It wasn't a benefit for the city because I was taking that tax base and eliminating it so that I could have parking because of your requirement. And what the city did that was fairly proactive, and you saw the campaign ad that I put up there, is that they invested in parking structures. And the attitude was kind of simple. We've socialized the car. When the car is moving around, somehow we've assumed that this is the only way that our transportation is going to work, or is a priority for most people. So we socialize that car on a road, but when the car stops, it's your problem. And you developers need to find a way to solve that transportation problem. And there's going to be costs for that. I don't know what it is for an underground structure here. The last time I worked in real estate development, it was $35,000 a space, $18,000 for a surface.
Probably in American numbers you're
Yeah.
talking, yeah. But
Yeah, it's more up here. So, that's the cost that has to be borne, and then that gets flipped onto the cost of the unit, and we wonder why units are expensive. So you can't have it all at once. And what's nice is, I think by taking on some structured parking decks as strategic investments could work out. So we did a project in Asheville where we wrapped a public parking garage with a hotel and housing and basically put taxes around a non-taxable entity. So it was a win-win-win situation. The community got parking. We put taxes around it. We also were able to discount the cost of housing because that housing that's on the project didn't need parking because there's a deck right there. And if people want to choose to buy a car, they pay the city to park there. So that's the way that works out. And for the folks that don't have a car, don't need a car, or use mass transit, they're not being penalized with an additional cost on their residential unit.
Paul, we've had chats about this many times. Let's let me hear your thoughts.
Yeah, first of all, it's a great thing that our city's actually looking at where, 10, 20 years ago, there was a really hard guidelines on parking. But from a market perspective, we still have hard guidelines on parking. So it's the yin and yang of the whole conversation. Even if we get rid of them, we have a market that still demands the car, unfortunately. So I'm going to mimic what I just said and say a good portion of that now has to go back to us doing a better job of creating neighborhoods so people can envision themselves getting out of their car. East City is a good example, again, of folks that every person moving in there had two cars, and that's just what our society has grown accustomed to. And most now have scaled back to one car because once they've put themselves in that situation of being able to walk to even 50% or bike to 50% or take public transit to 50% of the things that they get, they can see themselves not having a car. But unfortunately, again, with the sprawl of some of the services, we have to really improve our public transit system to get to, and also at the same time improve the overall neighborhood development. From our perspective, we plan to convert either parking or parking garages to housing down the road. So hopefully that is a situation in 5, 10, 15, 20 years that the demand for the car does change and we can reinvest and create more housing in those areas. But yeah, for now it still exists and it's something we have to figure out how to work around.
Yeah, I can add a little bit from my perspective. So we do a lot of asset management plans for municipalities, which is looking at all of the assets that they have to look after, how much it costs them, and how much revenue they get, and what's needed to keep it going. And every time we look at parking structures or car parks, it always costs more than it gets, which is exactly what you're seeing on the pictures. And just to put some context into the reason why is because it's just like a road, just as expensive in terms of the maintenance, the life cycle costs, and then rebuilding it every 20 years. And then you have all the winter maintenance in Canada as well, especially for the surface ones. So you have to salt it all the time. You have to plow it all the time. So they're a real drain on the entire land use within a city. In Toronto, there's the parking authority there. They've got loads of structures. They've got high-rise structures, street parking, and now they're starting to, they're looking after all of the electric aspects of this as well. So as we move into this sort of electric vehicle age, parking isn't just parking anymore. You're now putting even more expensive assets on those parking lots. So if you don't get rid of them soon, there's going to be a charger on every one, and there's going to be even more stuff to look after.
I know there's a great meme that I've seen, I'm sure others have as well, right, where it shows like a picture of like a Los Angeles freeway system, 712 lanes of traffic all bogged down with cars, and it says this is, you know, our world of internal combustion engines, and then it takes that same image, duplicates it, and says this is our world of electric cars, right? So yeah, electric cars aren't the solution, right, to that part of the problem. They're definitely helpful in other ways, but yeah, Jamie, jump in.
Yeah, I guess I want to think about, since you bring up the electric car, it's a great example of something where generally the technology makes sense. It's where we should be going for a number of reasons. I drive one. However, the migration from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles certainly has been rocky. It's been a big jump, whether it's fear of range anxiety, whether it's about finding charging, whether it's about cost of serving, whatever it is. And looking back on that challenge that the EV industry has faced, there hasn't been that bridge, right? It's been kind of like jumping from one island to the next. And so I think for parking, it's a matter of thinking about what is that bridge to get people from having a parking on demand in front of your house anywhere you want, and it's free, don't think about it, to not having any parking at all. What are those bridge things? Because I was at the opening of the East City condos for a tour a couple weeks ago, and a lot of folks from out of town were touring, and they came in thinking, oh great, there's parking for my car. When they got there, they looked around and they looked down Hunter Street and saw all the stuff they walked to. So when they left the building, it was like, oh, maybe I'm not going to need my car after a while, or I'm going to sell it, or I'm going to park it. So it's thinking about what the bridge is in our designs may be able to help us get to that destination. Great.
Any other final thoughts from the group before we maybe open it up to the crowd and ask some Q&A?
One small thing, I really appreciated everything that you did in that presentation. The one thing I took away was the targeting aspect that you talked about and how important it is for us as a community to really look at. It's obviously impossible to blue sky exercise plan our city, but you know, we have some resources as a city that we're very lucky to have, but they are limited in terms of land, especially in and around our core, and how important it is for, you know, our community planning staff, city as a whole, to really target what we need to create a healthy community, but also what we need from a financial perspective to look 20 years down the road so that we can replace all the infrastructure to float the whole thing, which is such a great conversation to have because it's just never really been had. So I appreciate that because it's good to know for people, some of us from Peterborough, looking down the road that we're having those conversations.
Yeah, it doesn't make it easier to sleep at night, but at least we're having the conversations, right? Okay, Owen, could I ask you to help? Yeah, all right. So folks, if anybody, opening up the floor, does anybody have any questions they want to ask of Joe or our panelists? Actually, Brad, I want Brad Appleby. Why doesn't Brad come on up to the stage?
It's so bright up here.
Just in case anybody has any, wants to get down into the nitty gritty about the plans for our city, then Brad's the man here to have them. So, okay, so does anybody have any thoughts, comments, questions, concerns? I'll even take tirades and outbursts if that's what we're looking at. Okay, yeah, we got someone there at the back. So, Owen, if you can get him a microphone.
Try to keep it not to a tirade. Everyone knows this stuff. I feel like a lot of this you're preaching to the choir here. The question is, when you drive down Lily Lake Road, we're still right now building car-dependent subdivisions that are sprawling that we know are going to be a huge negative. If the city knows all this and the planners know all this, why are we still building these things today? Like, they're literally building houses out there right now. You know, we know it's going to be a long-term negative. Why are we still allowing for this low-density sprawl? And sorry, I'm not like attacking you guys for it. Because I know it was done years ago.
We'll let the outsiders start with some commentary, and then I might turn to Brad here.
How do we stop this moving forward?
There's a great book that I like to share with people that was delivered by our federal government in 1973 by the Nixon administration. The book is called The Cost of Sprawl. So our federal government did the math and gave it to all of us in 1973, and we just totally ignored it. You know, I think that the pattern will continue, but the more that we're talking about it and putting the information out in a way that is understandable, And that's kind of the thing that we like to do is make a fun story. You sat through some painfully nerdy stuff. I don't have an economics degree. I don't have a finance degree. I'm an architect. And so can we have the conversation on a shared piece of paper? People will gather around a map or a picture and look at it and be curious. They're not going to look at a spreadsheet, right? You know, when's the last time you saw somebody gather around a spreadsheet? I mean, maybe this group here, but most people won't do that. So find a way to get people curious, and the machine of the real estate development will keep doing this because people are buying it. But the question is, can you afford it, and is this something to keep doing? You know, we have to change behavior by making people aware of this stuff. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but I don't know, you can try.
And maybe I'll just jump in with a comment there before, I don't know if you want to add anything to this, but the preaching to the choir comment, sure, right? But again, I think there's probably a larger portion of people in the community that don't necessarily have this perspective, haven't necessarily seen it, right? So I think part of it is it's the onus is on us as, you know, as city staff, right, to try to put that information out there, visualize it, share it, promote it, get more people having conversations like this around the coffee table or the dinner table where they can, so that way we can start to, you know, we have to name it and frame it, right, to be able to start tackling it. And there's a big machine called our current society with the momentum, right, and you can't turn you know, an ocean liner on a dime, right?
Well, also, just be fair. You know, the most important thing in that whole entire presentation is that picture of my mom. And my mom has a high school education and nothing more. And I used to go home and torture that poor woman every semester break in college and drive her around the suburbs of my hometown. And like in hindsight, I was guilting her about everything. And she didn't want to hear about climate change. She didn't want to hear about how she was killing the planet and all this other stuff. But we're sort of trained to do that in our own professions. So just don't be preachy about it, and allow people to give them information and allow them to absorb it. So just find a way to find common ground with people, because you know they're marketed against. Watch any hockey game. How many truck ads do you see? You know, there are trucks are out driving around through snowbanks and everything else, and no one does that with their trucks. But we, you know, everybody goes and buys them. We've been marketed this whole system because it makes other people tremendous amounts of money, and this is coming out of your tax pocketbook. So if you want to continue that path, there's better choices. But I don't think people have been ever told that there's a choice. We just assume that this is the way that things grow.
Great. Brad?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, I mean, I think I would echo what both Joe and Michael are saying. You know, at the end of the day, you know, there are folks out there who feel that is the type of environment they want to live in. We live in a society where we feel we should have the freedom of choice to live how we want to live. But at the end of the day, there's a consequence with that choice, right? And if you can understand, you know, say as a home buyer or as a renter, as a citizen in general, if you can understand sort of the implications of the choices that you make, then you might make different choices down the road, right? And you may want to live in a different way. And we've got a new official plan that came into effect last year. It fundamentally, you know, is trying to create sort of a shift in land use by focusing on intensification in certain areas, which really means attempting to shift people's behavior patterns and the choices that they make and how they interact with their urban environment, right? And I think, you know, what Joe has shared with us tonight helps us think about the consequences of our choices on a day-to-day basis, and knowing what we know and applying that to planning moving forward. You know, perhaps neighborhoods are planned differently, but perhaps, you know, the community speaks and they want to continue, to grow as they've always grown. And if that's the case, then we as a community need to be prepared to pay for that.
The question draws many parallels to climate change. We know about climate change, why don't we stop it? All of the issues that are associated with that are similar in nature to stopping development that we know is uneconomical.
Or also, I would add to it that the smoking campaign and the anti-smoking campaign, that started first by eliminating advertisement. Now, you can't do that where you eliminate the advertisement on subdivisions or whatever, but making people aware of that. They started with a campaign of making people aware of the costs and consequences to smoking. It wasn't telling people not to smoke. It was like, well, this is what it causes. These are the other problems that it brings. It's your choice if you want to have those. The label is on the box. Now, in Canada, you all are more socially aware than in the States about this because you also have to pay for all of the medical procedures that come along with it. So you actually have a direct cost to your bottom line as a government to pay for these consequences. So I think thinking through other campaigns and measures of how awareness and information helps start to make people aware that there are consequences to the choices.
And just like your sprawl book, Joe, they did the math and worked out smoking was costing more than they were getting in tax revenue, which made more sense to try and get you to give up. It wasn't just to look after you.
I love the cynicism. Anyone else? Any other questions? Yep.
Hi, thank you for this. I kind of want to pick up on the new subdivisions and acknowledge that they showed up on some of those maps as a positive area of town that was bringing in lots of revenue because they're quite a bit denser than old subdivisions, partly because of the places to grow. And I look at them maturing and I see multi-story residential getting built and I see mixed-use commercial and commercial areas in the designs. And so my question is, how can we motivate development so that those multi-use residential and commercial spaces get built out sooner? They seem to be the last thing built. If you look at the one out Chemong Road, like all the single-family homes seem to get built first, and then the row houses last, and now the stuff right out at the commercial end of the subdivision is empty still. And so the question is, are there any tax incentives to get those high-value parts of those neighborhoods that make them more livable built sooner?
I would say yes. I mean, I don't know the laws in Canada to doing that. But in the States, it would be tax abatements or tax increment finance. But, the thing, you're seeing some of these subdivisions, particularly straight up at the top up here, and it's because the density is more than the older subdivisions. But the thing to bear in mind is, why is it that, you could flip this on its head and say, why is downtown overpaying, right? So why is that accepted as a norm in the model? Why not give all of those whole old buildings that have made it past 100 years, give them a 10 years off as a birthday present, where they just don't pay taxes for 10 years? I don't know. I'm just saying that is that it just, these are again choices. For the single family or getting the commercial there, the commercial is going to follow the rooftops, and so that property owner is going to needs more people there before they can open up that commercial operation. So it might not even make sense, even with a tax break, to do it. Or it may, I don't know, but you can do the math on that and figure it out.
Yeah, I'll go from like an on-the-ground point of view on it. I guess the last 5 to 7 years in that world has been very bad on costs. So the real honest answer to what you're asking is they can't build them. And unfortunately, so when you're looking at building a house, you can build it per square foot and you can sell it for per square foot. When you're building those multi-residential properties, it's per square foot of cost, per square foot of rent. So that's the real struggle that communities all over North America now are having on the multi-residential type of properties, is trying to make financial sense of them. I know the city does have a lot of great financial incentives, and I know they're looking at some more right now. To be totally honest, they probably can't do enough to make the change. The old adage that's more true now than ever is I couldn't give you a piece of land for you to build an apartment building, and that's the way the math is. So obviously, they're still working very hard, I would imagine, and then I'm sure Brad and Michael can speak to that. But that's why you see the subdivisions go first, is because they can sell them and make some money off them. The math on the multi-res is changed so dramatically in the last 5 to 7 years that they just can't build them.
I would add that I think just naturally with the state of the housing market, and a cost of house being what it is these days, we are certainly seeing much more interest, much more diversification in the types of housing that is being produced in the newer subdivisions. And we are seeing the interest on the part of the builders to bring forward their multi-unit product sooner than we may have in the past. And I think that's probably just a function of being able to provide product that people can afford. Thinking about, how, if the city were to try to incentivize development, and we do offer a number of incentives right now for development, mostly focused in the downtown, and with a focus on affordable housing. That's not to say that that's the only way it could be done, right? And so if we as a community want to sort of shift our thinking around what we think is most important to incentivize, then there's certainly opportunities for looking at that. We have, under the Planning Act, a community improvement plan tool that we could use to allow ourselves to offer incentives for maybe it's purpose-built rental, or multi-unit residential, and even at the provincial level, they have built certain incentives into Development Charges Act, to try and ease the upfront costs for building, say, purpose-built rental. But at the end of the day, development's only going to move forward if it makes economic sense to do so.
I think I saw another, did I see another question somewhere? Yeah.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you to all the panelists for being here this evening and having this important discussion on land use. We've talked a lot about the value, and the presentation talked about the value of both residential and commercial. I was wondering about land use and the economics for industrial land. Our community has talked a lot about moving out into agricultural areas outside our built boundary, working out deals with neighboring townships for economic reasons, to have the land, obviously, to build larger industrial complexes. But sprawling in outside of our community for those types of industrial complexes, what would be the economic advantage or disadvantage of doing that?
Well, I think when you look at this map, there's a lot of properties that aren't really producing, that you already currently have inside your boundary. If you're to do one of those red-black models of what's actually losing you money, that would probably be the first thing that I would do. Rather than going out and adding more to the system, try to find a way to fix a wound that's currently inside the system. I don't know all of the tracts of land that you have to be informed in that. Typically, industrial doesn't produce a whole heck of a lot, but what the trade-off is, you're getting all of the jobs for it. So that's, in every community, industrial tends to be cheaper buildings. They tend to be bigger boxes. But the key thing is you don't want to have an industrial area where you're holding that land sacred and then you let somebody open up an accounting office. No offense to accountants in the room. But it's just like that's the wrong land use inside industrial to allow that stuff to creep in. So let that go toward other commercial areas where, well, one is those jobs will be nearby other restaurants and other amenities that they can participate in. And don't let it just consume your industrial area. I've seen this time and time again where you'll see office parks creep into the industrial areas because it's cheap real estate.
Yeah, and I think that might be a bit of a mistake maybe that has been made by historically where that's some of that land that we've allocated has been used for exactly those kinds of purposes. I don't know, Jamie, I saw you kind of getting Yeah, twitching there to jump in on that one. So maybe let's hear your thoughts.
Right. So a couple of thoughts. One is I think this is, as you brought up, this is a really important, complex, challenging discussion, but it's also not something that Peterborough will be able to easily do. I mean, another community sprawl can just kind of happen. You just kind of keep growing until you, like the foam you spray into the wall to fill a gap. It'll just keep going until you hit a gap, hit some kind of object. And we've kind of hit those objects, so anything which would happen is going to be very thought out and very necessary. But one point I do need to look at is looking at that map, you see, yeah, the industrial areas are under $50,000. But houses and buildings may be assessed at a certain value, but they don't pay the tax. The people who live in those homes pay the tax, and those people need jobs. So I think looking at employment land and employment opportunity has to be part of having that balanced portfolio of your land use in a community. And I should also think, one last point of that, because this is kind of, again, where I spend my days, is that a lot of the interest, though, that's coming towards Peterborough is not necessarily looking for that 500-acre large Amazon warehouse. There's much more of an interest in both different uses, so possibly having some more campus-like wording for a space, so having research and offices as well as manufacturing. But also the big question that companies are asking is, where are my employees going to live? So they're thinking about, again, this map and the intensification, so it's not just about that, having that 40-acre parcel.
Great, thanks for that. We're right at we're a little bit over time, but I'm gonna do we have any last questions? I see one over here. We'll let this will be our, Owen, oh, sorry, did we have one here too? Oh, sorry, no, we'll have, are we gonna get kicked out? I don't know if no, we're not gonna get kicked out. Okay, we'll take Reem and then we'll come over here and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you. Everyone can hear? Yes? Okay, wonderful. Thanks for taking my question. I can't help but think about the Canadian dream narrative or North American narrative, North American dream narrative that we've built once we settled here. Because the idea is you come here, you buy a house, it's got land, and you live the dream. You buy a car. And that narrative didn't change much in the way that we're selling that narrative out, whether it's government narrative, it's media narrative, Hollywood narrative. Everyone outside of North America thinks they're going to come here and do what others have done, 200 years ago. We come here, we build a house, you got the fence, you're going to drive a car, and you're going to live a good life. And that good life is something that a lot of folks come here thinking that's what they're building, right? My parents certainly feel proud that they own a house, that this house is fully paid, they have a backyard. That's something they worked really hard for 30 years. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, how can I give one day this land back to the Indigenous people? But they think I'm going to give up what they worked really hard for. I moved away from Canada for 5 years and lived in Cairo. Cairo, incredibly dense. Lived in an apartment, walked around as much as I can, used public transit. If you've lived in Cairo, you know that's not a good way to live. But I chose that because I thought that's what I want. And people thought I was a backwards Canadian living in Cairo because everyone was trying to get out of the apartment, out of the dense structures, and live in the suburbs. They want the suburbs, they want the long roads, the cul-de-sacs. That's what they dream of. And that's because of the narrative that we here sold them, whether it's through colonialism in those countries a long time ago, or even current day, actually. That narrative continues to exist. But I don't know if we've done much to change what is being demanded here, because demand is driving the supply, right? Like the developments that continue to come up, that's because there's demand for them. And again, it's demand by everyone, not just newcomers or immigrants or so on. I'm just saying that the 200-year narrative I don't think has shifted enough for us to replace that narrative with a new one that puts value on what we're suggesting here.
Yeah, Joe.
Well, when we did the math in Eugene, Oregon, Eugene was talking about expanding their growth boundary. And every issue that you all face here, lack of land, need for more housing, drive down affordability, et cetera, builders willing to build this because the people wanted it. Single-family housing in Eugene, Oregon is subsidized to the tune of $1,400 per house. So we just put that out there for the community. Is that the best use of $1,400 per household? Or would you want that to go to a daycare, or would you want that to go to, like, what kind of trade-offs would you make? You've lived in a place of high density and walkability and experienced it. I brought my mom to Italy, and her mind exploded, and she's Italian. And she's like, this is amazing. And I was kind of heartbroken because I was kind of like, your parents, how would they leave this place? You know, and they don't have horns growing out of their head. They're not mutants. They're Italians like me and my mom, but living in walkability and living in a different environment of beauty and making different choices. And again, these are all things that we just haven't been exposed to realize that you can actually live with less space and have less impact, and there's a trade-off. So even though we're selling this American dream, very, very similar dream being sold up here that's down across the border over there, I don't think we've ever been explicit with people to say that you can still have ownership, you can still have wealth, you can still have access to your government and have a voice in your government that you don't get in a lot of other countries, but you can also have a benefit fiscally and financially and also environmentally if we made different choices. Does that make sense? Because we're not seeing that trade-off of how we're killing the planet, how we're polluting the planet with that trade-off of that American dream. We can all move to electric cars, but guess what? They run on rubber wheels. I don't know if you know this, but asphalt is made as a byproduct of gasoline production. So how are we going to be repaving the roads when we're not producing asphalt? No one's answered that question. Asphalt in the year of 2021 to 2022 went up 30% in cost. Like, we're just at the tip of the iceberg of economic collapse, and no one's talking about it. We're still walking around hanging on to this marketing idea that we're going to dream our way out of this. It's not a dream anymore. There's consequences.
Amen.
I'm a wet blanket tonight. I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll take our last
positive.
question. We'll take our last question here then, and we'll wrap it up.
I have too many questions, but I'm curious, Joe, from a revenue perspective, because I am a numbers person, and I certainly am a ratepayer that has been very concerned about the state of our roads and the sprawl of, the increase in kilometers of roads, sidewalks, and I've always asked the question, how many extra bodies did they increase in public works to maintain that infrastructure, increase plows and things like that, because I understand that. But where I'm curious, and it might be too big a question and I don't have enough details to probably ask correctly, but from a revenue perspective, tax basis, I think based on your numbers, the multi-residential is a higher tax base than other bases. So in Peterborough, there's discussion of building an entertainment complex in around the Market Plaza area and in the old Public Works area. So my question is, from a tax perspective, an entertainment complex, would that typically generate more revenue on a tax revenue basis than a multi-residential? So in my mind, would it make more sense for the city of Peterborough to maybe look at that parcel of land for multi-residential to generate more revenue, tax revenue, than from an entertainment complex?
Well, right now, your tax rate for commercial property is higher than residential, straight across the board. So on a per meter basis, the entertainment complex is going to produce more. But I'd need to know more about the equipment that's in it, how you tax equipment here in this province. In the States, you'd be taxed for this speaker, the lights, all of that is physical equipment that's part of the commercial environment. I don't know what kind of complex this is. I would need to know more architecturally.
And I think somebody up there might be able to correct me, but I'm not sure if it's an entertainment complex, arena, I don't think it's going to be arena, but is that private, and is commercial rent being charged on an entertainment complex when it's not in use?
So maybe I'll jump in, just say, so like, I guess this is in the feasibility stages now, and so those things are I guess, being kind of considered and looked at, and so, but maybe the takeaway from a conversation like this is making sure we're understanding what the return on investment for that might be, and then does that have any other spin-off benefits of other redevelopment in the area that would also potentially, so like, I think do the math, right?
Yeah.
And
Could you do both? I don't know how big this building's going to be. Could you put an apartment on top of it? Yeah.
right.
Maybe I can give you some assurance from someone that's been, same kind of mindset as you are. I've noticed a massive difference in the last 5-10 years in our city, how they think about investing money as opposed to spending money. So to Michael's point there, I think anything like what you're talking about would be done, if it was ever done, to spur economic growth, to spur tax revenue, whatever that may be. I don't think there's a world anymore where any city, especially ours, can spend money. There has to be a business case behind all of it. So I think that's what these kind of things, you're going to see a lot more of this, which I've seen a lot more in conversations with city staff. It's really great because it answers a lot of your questions.
One last comment question. This was excellent information to share. Is this information, this presentation from Joe, being shared with council? I mean, it's one thing to share with staff, but at the end of the day, is it being shared with council?
So, so the event's being recorded. We'll have the materials. All councilors were invited. I think I saw some, but I don't think I see them anymore. But but yeah, obviously they were invited, and we'll push out the information. Obviously, they're very busy individuals as well, and so sometimes they have conflicts and can't make things work. So we'll push the information to them and give them the recording and some other information so that it is available to them. And obviously at the staff level, we're going to be integrating this thinking into a lot of that, which we do. So they're going to see it sort of through the grapevine, I guess, or through diffusion, I guess, and that. So there. But we've gone over time. I know folks probably have other places to get to. Our guests have already donated a lot of time, and I'm very grateful for that. So this does conclude our event for the evening, folks. So like I said, though, last year was a start to the conversation. This year, we're continuing the conversation. Let's continue to build this to help position Peterborough as a future-ready destination of choice. As I did mention, we will be putting some of this information up on our websites and other things, so just follow us along there. We'll look at getting some things up on the Connect PTBO as well. So that will be the primary point of contact for folks that are interested in these discussions. So yeah, I think with that, we're building on this through upcoming consultation of engagement, approaches to inform ongoing asset management planning as we start to have the difficult conversations of desired service levels and the financial sustainability of delivering those services. Tune in Thursday, check out the asset management plan. It's a very thrilling read, I can say. Be sitting down when you read it because the numbers are large. And we're going to have some, hopefully, very grown-up conversations about how we start getting ourselves out of that hole. So with that, thank you very much, everybody, and everybody have a great night.